Hi, it's Andrew Collins here. I'm going to be telling you all about the incredible discoveries that have been made in Turkey at a place called Karahan Tepe. It's the sister site of Göbekli Tepe, somewhere I know very well. I've been to both Göbekli and Kara, and on many occasions. So I'm going to unpack the lot and tell you what's going on there. So with that, I shall share my screen, find my lecture, and start the slideshow. And here we go. Right, Karahan Tepe, civilization of the ancients. Right, but before we get into the discoveries, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my past and where I'm coming from as far as this story is concerned. In 1996, a book of mine was published called From the Ashes of Angels, The Forbidden Legacy of a Fallen Race. This is the cover here. And basically, it proposed that the founders of the Neolithic revolution and thus civilization were a shamanic elite that entered Eastern Anatolia at the end of the last ice age. And they may or may not have looked like this, but some great images from Russell Hussein there, an artist who's worked on various of my books. And basically what it also said is that this shamanic elite are remembered as the watchers, Nephilim, and Anunnaki of myth and legend, their homeland being the true Garden of Eden, and that you were to look for this in southeastern eastern Turkey, and there you would find this evidence of this lost civilization. That's what I basically said in that book. Now, here's the interesting things. I mean, the book went on to be a bestseller in various places of the world, but the book was actually written in 1995, just as the first spades were going in the ground at Göbekli Tepe. I had no knowledge of Göbekli Tepe, all the great discoveries that would come out of that. And what we know about Göbekli Tepe, which you can see here, is that it was discovered in the fall of 1994. The excavations began there in 1995, and it wasn't made public until the year 2000. Prior to that, it was only mentioned in a few, journals here and there. Nobody really took any notice of it. Now, in 2002, From the Ashes of Angels was published in Turkey. And obviously most of it was about Turkey anyway. And again, it was quite a huge hit there. It's still being read to this day, although there's another whole story about that, which I'm not going to go into right now, which some of you will already know. But anyway, that allowed me to get to Göbekli Tepe for the first time, and all the other sites that I talked about in the book. And here I am there at Göbekli. I mean, there was nobody there at the time. The only person that was there was the owner and his son. And they came across and said hi. And, we had a little walk around there and, obviously took some photographs and whatever. And to be honest, the place just did my head in. And I came back and I started on a book, which was eventually published in 2006, called Cygnus Mystery, which was the first book that I wrote that featured Göbekli Tepe. But whilst I was at the ancient city of Haran, which is about 45 minutes journey from Şanlıurfa, the main city in the area, some little kids came up to me trying to sell me a book. It was secondhand, and it was about the antiquities of the area. And I looked at it, and I saw a site in there which I didn't know anything about. And it was this place called Karahan Tepe. And there'd been a T-shaped pillar found there with a snake on it, which you can see in the screen here now, and a few other bits and pieces. And it was quite clearly from the same ancient culture that had created Göbekli Tepe at least 11,000 years ago. And the T-shaped pillar had been removed to Haran University. But I thought, let's go there and see if we can, see if we can suss out the place. So I went there. It's in the Tektek Mountains of southeastern Turkey. On the eastern side of the Haran Plain, you can see where Göbekli Tepe is on here. You can see where Şanlıurfa is. And this is me there on that day. I just come from a place called Sogmatar, which is not too far away, which is a very interesting place. Another place like Haran, which was created by the Sabians, these star-worshipping ancient astronomers of, about 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Anyway, so I got to this site and it blew my mind for the simple reason that you had the same type of stuff that was going on at Göbekli Tepe, but this place was totally unexcavated. And you had this hill and you had these fragments of carved objects just laying about all over the place, which were clearly from the same type of enclosures that you find at Göbekli Tepe. Here I am with one, although God knows what's going on in my head at this point. I look in a very strange state there. But anyway, there were T-shaped pillars everywhere. And you can see them here. You can see one on the right with thistles growing out of it. And these holes around them are what's known as test pits. And they were dug around them by a team from Haran University led by Bahattin Shelek. And basically, this was just to have a look at them. I mean, this wasn't proper excavations. This was just digging around them to find out what was there. And obviously, probably based on this, the story that I'd read in this little book, which, by the way, I did buy from these kids and still got to this day. And so, we looked around. I mean, I was with a guide. We were there, in official capacity. I mean, these were people that had been hired by the mayor of Diyarbakir to help me see these sites. And we even found a mini T-shaped pillar, which you can see here on the left. And I mean, I went back there on various occasions between 2004 and 2018. I think it was the last time I was there. And I tried to map as many of the stones as possible. Also trying to see what size they were, obviously using a ruler. And just gathering information. I did a 2 or 3 articles about it, which I'll link in the description of this video. And, there was a number of really interesting things found. I mean, these are what's known as porthole stones. These would have been either in the roof or more likely in the walls and dry stone walls of enclosures as much as 11,000 years ago. And I mean, these look like something that you would find in connection with a Gothic cathedral or something from the 12th or 13th century. And yet here they are just scattered around Karahan Tepe. And the one on the bottom right is actually even being used to form part of a fire pit. I mean, that's their worth, as it were. And I mean, on the top of the hill at Karahan, which we'll see shortly, there are hundreds of these strange bore marks. Some are in clusters and are probably only about 3 or 4 inches across. Others are much wider, about a foot across. And I mean, the ones you can see on the bottom left, there's another one of these fragments of a porthole stone there. And interestingly, some of them come in pairs and they definitely look like 2 huge eyes staring at you out of the bedrock. And I think that this is important. Some people have suggested that this relates to some kind of spirit coming out of the rock itself. And I think that should certainly be, considered. I have other views about what they might represent. I think they possibly would have contained small pieces of meat or liquid in the past that would have been taken away probably by carrion birds or vultures or whatever. Perhaps the whole thing was even used for divination. Anyway, another thing of interest there is the so-called unfinished monolith. Here's my colleague Hugh Newman here photographing it. I mean, it's a massive stone, far bigger than the T-shaped pillars that you can see today at Karahan. When I say today, I mean before all of the excavations took place, which we'll be talking about. And this one was cut out of the bedrock. It's on the western side of the hill, which is quite steep. And clearly something went wrong and it was left in its position. There's a similar unfinished stone at Göbekli. Hugh has written about this. He believes that, you know, that one of the reasons why stones like this were left in place could be some kind of offering to the spirit of the land, and that is well worth thinking about. And also the local farm there, which is called Quachuali, the people there, you know, found various objects, obviously across the years, including these huge stone bowls, which you know they just use for their own purposes. I mean, they're on their land. They brought them across to the farm. You know, they're obviously happy to show visitors of them. But here's the bizarre thing. I mean, you know, these are probably 11,000 years old. This is the bizarre thing about this. Anyway, so that was then. This is what Karahan Tepe looked like before 2019. Is that right? Yeah, 2 years ago. You know, it's me, you know, looking at one of the exposed stones, and others obviously behind there. You know, you can see, and this is what it looks like today. This is the results of the excavations that have been done there. Extensive excavations that have uncovered a whole number of enclosures. And I mean, I'm seeing these for the first time. I have not been there since 2018. I'd love to go back there, but you know, this is what's there now. And I mean, you know, look, you can see similar enclosures to those at Göbekli Tepe. You have T-shaped pillars. You know, these enclosures with very flat floors. The one in the foreground is made of paving stones. The one in the background, which we call the elliptical enclosure, has got floors made of terrazzo, which is a kind of lime mortar cement, basically. And this is that elliptical enclosure. And quite clearly, work is still going on there, and some incredible things have already been found, which we'll try and break down as we go along. Now, I'll be honest, there's a lot of monuments here, which I have absolutely no idea what the hell's going on. I mean, across time, we'll get new ideas. I'll have think tanks with some of my colleagues. I've been in communication with Graham Hancock about some of this, who has been to the site. He's got a blog, which I'm going to link below, out on the discoveries at Karahan. But we can say a few things. I mean, firstly, for instance, what we got here, you've got this incredible shrine here, right in the center of the picture, with these standing stones that are cut out of the living bedrock, 11 of them with a strange head at the side, which we'll come on to. But this enclosure above that to the left, where the walkway is, I have absolutely no idea what the hell was going on there and why it's got such a deep recess in it, you know, or why there's a hole in the front of this pillar shrine, you know, in the elliptical enclosure. I mean, it's anybody's guess at the moment. Now, the work there has been carried out by Dr. Necmi Karu of Istanbul University. He's the main guy there that's been heading all these excavations since 2019. And I mean, the one thing I can say is that they're doing an incredibly thorough job, and they're also exposing an awful lot of enclosures, more so than what they were doing at Göbekli Tepe. I mean, at Göbekli, work still continues, but to be honest, it has slowed down dramatically, I'll be honest. Now, this is the interior of that elliptical enclosure. I mean, you can just get an idea of the sophistication of what's going on here. And actually cut into the bedrock on the western side of this elliptical enclosure, you have these four, what I call stone thrones, each with the sort of like weird alcove-like walls connected with them, which are very clearly for people to sit down and look out on the proceedings that are taking place in the actual enclosure. Now, here's a big reveal. I've been working with engineer Rodney Hale, somebody who I've worked with on this subject of geometry and archaeoastronomy for the last 25 years, looking at sites all over the world, including Göbekli Tepe. And we looked at the geometry of the elliptical enclosure and tried to see if it had any kind of regular pattern which might be recognized, and indeed it does. It would seem, whether by accident or design, we can't say at the moment, to be based on a ellipse with a ratio of 6 to 5. So that's 6 in the length, obviously 5 in the width or the breadth. Or more correctly, it seems to work even better for 32-27 ratio, and more on that shortly. I'll go into the actual axis of it at the moment, but the one thing that you'll notice is a line that goes from what we call the southern entrance through the axis of this pillar's shrine in the top left-hand corner. It's at an angle of roughly around 341.5 degrees azimuth. And this starts to become very, very important, because the complex at Karahan Tepe is located immediately east of the hill's northern termination. You can see here an overlay that was done by Rodney Hale. The patch, the brown patch that you can see here, that's the modern excavations. Here is, below it, is Karahan itself. And all of these red marks are geolinks to objects that were photographed by either myself or Hugh Newman in the past. We're talking about stone porthole fragments. We're talking about standing stones, or any feature that seemed to be important. Of course, obviously, there were some directly where the new excavations are, but they're covered up now. And most of the activity is in the north and the east, a little bit to the west, but almost nothing towards the south. And it's very clear that the complex has been uncovered faces towards the north. You can't even see the south from there, because the hill rises up like a backbone from there and obscures your view anywhere towards the south. I mean, you can see towards the east, you can see towards the north, you can't see towards the west unless you get up on top of this rocky knoll, which is, we call the northern knoll. It's a rock outcrop, and it's very clearly important to what was going on here, as I say, as much as 11,000 years ago. And I'm going to say 11,000 years ago. We'll look at dates as we go along. And this is what that northern knoll looks like. And when you're there, because you can't look south, the natural view is going to be towards the north. You're looking towards the north. That's where you stand. That's where you will be looking towards. So what's over there? Well, the farm, Quachuali farm, that's there in the center of the picture, you can see here. But there's this very distinguished looking rocky hill immediately rising up behind the farm. And here's where we start getting interesting as far as the names are concerned, because Karahan Tepe was never known by that name in the past. That was given to it by the first archaeologist that really investigated the site, who was Bahatin Shilek of Haran University. Now, according to the farm owners, Karahan Tepe was originally called Quachuali Tepe, but Quachuali Tepe also seems to be the name that was given to the northern hill. So to save confusion, we're just going to call the southern hill Karahan Tepe, which is what it's known as today, but the northern hill we're going to be calling Quachuali North Tepe. Okay, and that's what you can see here now. So let's just go back one. The elliptical enclosure bears an alignment towards Quachuali North Tepe. This line that goes from the southern entrance through the pillar shrine, as we'll call it, we'll look at that in a minute, points directly at Quachuali North Tepe, okay? And I think that that's quite significant. Firstly, because there is a very strange entrance, almost like a porthole, going from the elliptical enclosure through into the pillar shrine. And this has been confirmed to be by Graham Hancock, who has actually been inside the pillar shrine. So there's a direct relationship between those two monuments, directly. In other words, you'd have probably done something inside the elliptical enclosure and then gone inside the pillar shrine. And this is what the pillar shrine looks like. There are 11 standing stones which are actually carved out of the bedrock inside this deep recess. All of them are in situ, other than this one here, which is very strange and points to roughly towards the entrance, and in my opinion is animistic in nature. It's very clearly some kind of creature. What type of creature, we don't know. I mean, it could be a snake, it could be a crocodile, it could be something else, we don't know. It could even be a lion, we don't know. But it's a creature. And as to which creatures are important here, we'll talk about that, we'll come on to it. But there's another picture of it, another view of the shrine. Graham Hancock writes that it has a very eerie atmosphere. Very clearly, it has some kind of liminal aspect to it. In other words, this is ritual, ceremonial, or shamanistic in nature. But you know, you wouldn't have got many people inside this. You know, 2 or 3 at the maximum. So it's not somewhere where you'd be doing mass ceremonies. If anything, it's going to be for personal initiations, or maybe something more specific, which we'll come back to. Now, this is the head that juts out of the western side of that deep enclosure, sorry, the pillar shrine itself. And I mean, this is obviously quite an extraordinary head. It's on a very long neck, which to me suggests that it might be snake-like. It's coming out the bedrock itself, suggesting that once again, this is the spirit coming out of the rock. Here's that alignment that I talked to you about, going straight to Quachuali, North Tepe. You can see it there. I mean, it looks a long way away, but it's not. I mean, you can walk from the excavations down to the farm in about 10 minutes, and you can walk from the farm up to the top of Quachuali in about another 15. So that's it. You know, there's clearly a relationship between Karahan Tepe, the complex, and Quachuali, North Tepe. So this is what it looks like from the actual farm itself. That's how close it is. And you can get up there pretty easily. So what is there that's special about this particular hill? Well, to start off with, it has 2 very large caves and at least one smaller one. The 2 larger ones are on the western side, the smaller one is on the eastern side. And the ones on the western side are massive, and they have evidence of burning on the ceiling, probably through use across, you know, countless millennia. Modernly, they're used to put animals in very bad weather. But what we can say is that although they are natural, they have definitely been carved out. I mean, this is the entrance into one of them. And you can see this from this right angles carving here, which I've highlighted there. Now, this and other features in these 2 large caves tell me that they were used in the deep past for some kind of ceremonial or ritual activity. Whether they go back to the pre-pottery Neolithic age of Karahan Tepe or Göbekli Tepe, we don't know. I think they almost certainly do, and I'll tell you for why. Because you do find evidence of discarded stone tools, flakes that almost certainly go back to the Neolithic age in this vicinity, but you don't find any evidence of anything else whatsoever until essentially the time of the Arab conquest and the medieval Arab pottery you find up there. Nothing in between, not one thing. And to me, that suggests that there's been no activity up on that hill for a very, very long time. This is the entrance into the cave on the eastern side. As you can see, it's covered over with debris now. But myself and a colleague in the past investigated this cave to some depth. We didn't go that far, but it's quite clear that this would have been a brilliant place to use for liminal purposes. In other words, some kind of shamanic initiations. That's my opinion. It's functional. It's not simply there to store stuff. This has a reason for being there, and a reason almost certainly for being enhanced. Now, I can't prove that the one on the east side was enhanced. It looks like it, certainly from the entrance. The ones on the west side definitely were. But there are other features on Quachuali North Tepe as well. On the northern end is what I call the moon feature, or the crescent feature, which is a series of stones which, quite clearly, as the name suggests, make a crescent and have an interior area with some rocks at the back. Now, clearly, this could be any age, but I strongly suspect that it probably is pre-pottery Neolithic. But more important is what we call the rock temple. Myself and Hugh Newman explored this a few years ago, and it is a right-angled structure cut into the bedrock at the northern end of Quachuali North Tepe. You can see one view of it here. There's another view of it there. You can see these big boulders on its western side. On its northern side is these steps. Now, I'm not sure whether that was, almost like an altar-like area, or whether it was some kind of entranceway. We don't know. I mean, the main entrance would seem to be towards the east. As you can see there, you can see where the step feature is, roughly in the north. And it's about 10.5 meters by 7.5 meters in length, so quite some size. And once again, I'm pretty certain that it's pre-pottery Neolithic. I don't see any reason to suggest that it's any more modern than that. And as you can see, that it's clearly blocked off on its western side by these huge blocks. And I think this is on purpose. It could be to block out excess weather, but equally, it could be ritualistic in the sense that you needed to be blocked out from the view towards the west and only look towards the east or possibly the north. And if that's the case, it conforms very well with the orientations of the main complex on Karahan Tepe itself, which is towards the north and towards the east. And as I said, occasionally you will see on the ground these blade, segments that you can see one here, which I just photographed. These are probably date to the pre-pottery Neolithic B phase. So they're probably about 8,800 to 7,600 BC. And as I said, there's no other evidence of anything, later than that until you get virtually into medieval times. Now, another feature on Quachuali North Tepe is what we call, I call the Snake Pit, although in all honesty, that was what was suggested to us by the farm owners, because they said that it was the place of snakes. And in fact, they warned that there were various snakes on Quachuali North Tepe. We didn't see any. And I'm not even sure why this story should evolve, really, or where it comes from. But we'll come back to that, because it may be something to do with something far older, to do with the folklore of the site. But essentially, this is just a hole in the bedrock down into a beehive-like chamber. And I investigated it. I bought a ladder in Llanlurfa, brought it all the way to the farm, and went down to investigate the snake pit. And obviously, I dressed appropriately for it, just in case there were any snakes there. There weren't, but I looked at the walls. The walls are very carefully carved. It's impossible to say how old it is. I think if you spoke to an archaeologist or historian, they'd probably say that it was a cistern. But why you'd have a cistern right on the top of a hill as opposed to at the base, I just don't know. I mean, probably somebody will tell me that. The other thing is that there are other carved features in the proximity of that snake pit, including this right-angled wall right behind it. And if you put your back against it, you face out towards Karahan Tepe, which is this scene here. And you can see that the farm on the left, you can see Karahan behind that. That's the hill that rises up, and you can see the rocks on the top here. And the excavations are here. In this area here. Okay. So what is the relationship between these two hills? Well, is it possible that the pillar shrine is some kind of place of the ancestors, drawing their influence across from Quachuali North Tepe? But why 11 pillars? Why not 12, like in the enclosure D at Göbekli Tepe, or in the cult building at Navali Chori, which today is inside Şanlıurfa Museum? Don't know. I mean, the 12 could be made up by the head itself coming out of the wall. But that is a mystery, and that intrigues me. All right, so is Karahan Tepe a naval site like Göbekli Tepe? Now, in his blog, Graham Hancock asked the question of whether Karahan Tepe is a naval site. Now, what does this mean? Well, Göbekli means naval. Essentially, you'll see it referred to as Potbelly Hill, but that's not the name. As I wrote in my book, Göbekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods, a long time ago, Göbekli means naval. So it's the hill of the navel, and that suggests what's known in Greek as an omphalos. And an omphalos are the centers of a cosmic world, basically joining Earth with heaven, or the sky world with the underworld. And Graham has asked whether something similar was going on at Karahan Tepe. Well, interestingly enough, on the eastern side of Karahan Tepe is this, I'm going to say, vulva-shaped opening into the rock. This is clearly being carved. It probably was carved out from something natural, but it's there. It's not very big, and you can't really get into it. It's not meant for that, I don't think. But quite clearly, Quachuali has caves. The only caves in the whole of that area are in Quachuali North Tepe. And it would seem that Karahan Tepe faces out towards that hill. So there's a relationship. Now, what does Quachuali mean? Okay, Quachuali is the name of the farm. Here's its signpost. And behind it, by the way, you can see Karahan Tepe. In Turkish, Quachuali means goat or bald head, which could suggest the baldness of a rocky hill like Karahan. However, in Kurdish, the name means woman, mother, or queen. And if this can be applied to the North Tepe, then this is very interesting, because I wonder if Quachuali North Tepe represents some kind of Sipalpu, a womb of the mother, the place of emergence, the hole to other worlds in Hopi and Zuni tradition. And I mean, this one is in the Grand Canyon, or very close to it. And it's a place of emergence. I mean, there are several of these in Native American tradition, particularly in the South. And although that's in North America and we shouldn't really mix cultures, what's not to say that either Karahan or more probably Quachuali North Tepe represents some kind of womb of the mother, a place of emergence. Now, the other interesting fact that we can add to this is that the main symbol, the main animistic form, the main totemic image that keeps coming up at Karahan is the snake. Right from that very first T pillar that was found back in the 1990s, right the way through to various carved snakes, which I don't have pictures for, but I can tell you that are there on the walls of the bedrock at Karahan, plus at least 2 other stones have been found with snakes on them. And there's a very serpentine feel to the whole site. And this, I think, is interesting. I mean, at Göbekli Tepe, you've got other animals that are important, like the fox, that I say the lion, it's probably a panther, great leonine form. Also, you get snakes there, but the vulture is a very important symbol at Göbekli Tepe. But here at Karahan, it is definitely the snake. So why the snake? Well, what's interesting is that in Anatolian and in Kurdish tradition, in that part of Turkey, in southeast and eastern Turkey, they're very big on a serpent mother, a snake mother called the Shamaran. And the Shamaran lives in caves, and there's folk stories relating to her. You can still get her image on plates and framed images today. She usually has 7 legs, which I think is very symbolic, very much like Tiamat in Mesopotamian tradition. And her tail ends with the head of a snake. And on the right here, you can see what appears to be a representation of the Shamaran from a place called Ani in eastern Turkey. And this dates to medieval times and has what I would say quite a Persian influenced look to the art, to be honest. But that almost certainly is a representation of the Shamaran. And the Shamaran has been identified as an Anatolian form of the mother goddess in Mesopotamian tradition called Ishara. So that's interesting. Is it possible that Quachuali North Tepe represented some kind of womb, not just of a primeval earth mother, but one that was related very specifically to snakes? And could it even be that the rituals that took place in those caves would have involved snakes in some manner? I think that needs to be considered. The carved head, as I mentioned, inside the pillar shrine is on a long neck. I think that is snake-like in appearance. It could even be that the weird curved stone in the middle is also a snake rising up out of the ground. But here's something else. Graham Hancock mentions this in his blog. He says that some of the archaeologists working at the site believe that the pillar shrine could have been used for intoning or making sounds that would have been carried into the elliptical enclosure. This is really, really interesting because going back to the shape of the elliptical enclosure, the geometry suggests a 6:5 or 32:27 ratio ellipse. And for those of you that know anything about music and musical chords and intervals, you'll know that that relates to what's known as a minor third in the Pythagorean musical tradition. Now, as I said, it could be coincidence that you have this elliptical geometry associated with this particular enclosure. I mean, it's not absolutely perfect, but it's pretty good. And we have found similar geometry, myself and Rodney Hale, at the elliptical enclosures at Göbekli Tepe, although there the ratio is 4:3 in enclosures D and enclosures C, and to a degree enclosure H. Look that up in my book, The Cygnus Key. So how old is Karahan Tepe? Well, here is just a little timeline going forward into the future. The Younger Dryas event, 10,800 BC. Pre-Pottery Neolithic A begins 9,600 BC. That's essentially when Göbekli Tepe kicks off. And then you have the B phase of it, Pre-Pottery Neolithic B, starting in 8,800 BC. And then you have the Ceramic Neolithic starting about 6,500 BC, which includes the so-called Ubaid culture, of Mesopotamia, but also, of course, the great structures like Çatalhöyük and Hasalak in central southern Turkey and in southwestern Turkey, those two sites. They date to this period. They're ceramic Neolithic, and then obviously you have the different phases going on from there down to the Sumerian civilization, which really starts its writing career around 2900 BC. So how old is it? Well, I'll be honest, we don't know. Some of the reports are coming out suggesting that it's 10,000 BC, in other words, 12,000 years old. This is Karahan Tepe I'm talking about. I have seen no actual evidence to suggest that's the case. I've seen, I mean, comparing it with what's going on at Göbekli Tepe, I can't see it yet. Now, I mean, I would love the evidence, and if the evidence is there, show me that these structures do date to that time frame. I think that they are more likely date to around 9,000 BC. And I say that because that would conform very well with the stylized enclosures at Göbekli Tepe, the types of the T-shaped pillars that are used, the size of them, the appearance of them, and that various other enclosures were built either to the side of the main ones that you can see here that are built into the bedrock, either at the same time or much later, probably down to around 8,000 to 7,500 BC. That would be my estimate. So I'm going to go for 9,000 BC for these old structures at the moment. If they are older, everything I'm about to say will revise for upcoming talks like this. So astronomy can help us date Karahan Tepe, but without confirmation from C14, that's carbon-14 dates of organic materials, any alignments that we can suggest relating to this must remain speculation. And having said that, we can say that the main axis of the elliptical enclosure, which we're going to take as the central focus of the whole site at the moment, is approximately 10 degrees east of north. And that's based on this ellipse. Okay, I mean, it fits pretty well with the monuments that you can see here. I think that the south probably originally was some kind of entrance. I think on the north, you have some kind of bench that could have been an altar. And of course, obviously, we have this pillar shrine, which is connected with the elliptical enclosure. Well, obviously, there are various angles that we can take here, but let's look at the alignment of 341.5 degrees through the pillar shrine, because even before the discovery of the complex, I was looking at alignments from the northern knoll at Karahan Tepe, beneath which this whole complex has now been found, towards Quachuali North Tepe. And essentially they go from around 337 degrees to about 341. Yeah, and that's based on the very summit of it, not its sides. And what's so interesting is that in 9000 BC, this would match the setting of the star Deneb in the constellation of Cygnus, also known as the Northern Cross. So basically what we're saying is that if you're on the northern knoll, immediately above the complex, you would have seen Deneb setting down at the same angle as the pillar shrine is coming out of the elliptical enclosure. I find that intriguing because, as many of you will know from my own books, we've found very similar alignments from the enclosures at Göbekli Tepe towards the setting of Deneb, the same star in the constellation of Cygnus. So why is Cygnus important? Well, universally around the world, from Egypt to North America to Mexico to Peru, to various places around the world. Cygnus represented the northern entrance into the so-called Dark Rift, which was seen as a place of entry into the sky world. Just look, for instance, at the traditions of the Maya, the road to Zilbalba, going up from the area of the ecliptic around Sagittarius and Scorpius, going all the way up to Cygnus, where you would enter into the sky world. It would seem to be a universal system that was in place, cosmology, as much as 11,000 years ago. I mean, Graham Hancock talked about this in his last book, America Before. My colleague, Greg Little, wrote about this extensively in his book, Path of Souls, which came out in 2014, and I've talked about it in various books as well. So that's the reason why Deneb may well have been connected with any alignments. But there are other possibilities as well. We talked earlier about the so-called stone thrones. Now, they're jutting out of the bedrock on the western side of the elliptical enclosure. They face roughly towards the east. And if it were possible to view the horizon from here, you know, in the epoch of construction, what would you have seen? Well, the most obvious, and in all honesty, the only constellation that makes sense, is Leo, the lion, one that obviously we'll all be so much familiar with, to do with Egypt and the first time and traditions connected with that. However, it's not as plain and simple as that, because we know that the orientation of that ellipse is 10 degrees to the south of east. And for Regulus to have risen at that exact azimuth, giving it an altitude of 2 degrees, you'd have to go back to 10,100 BC. That's, I think, too early for Karahan Tepe. If you come forward to 9,500 BC, that same astronomical event occurs at 6 degrees south of east. That makes more sense, and we might find out that Karahan Tepe goes back to 9,500 BC. But it also means that the ellipse is slightly askew, which is possible. You know, we could be 1 or 2 degrees out. So, you know, but something tells me that Leo was important, and we can tell that from Göbekli Tepe. One of the later enclosures there, known as the Lion's Pillars, Lion Pillars Shrine, if I remember rightly, that's it. Building, Lion Pillars building, is orientated east-west, which is quite unlike the virtual north-south orientations of the larger elliptical enclosures at Gobekli. And at its eastern end, in other words, the direction of the rising sun, you have 2 pillars on which are these rising huge leonine forms. Both of them are on the inside of the posts. In other words, you'd be looking up at each of them as you went towards the eastern end of this particular enclosure. And they're probably not lions, by the way. They almost certainly panthers or leopards, which was a very, very important animal associated with not just the pre-pottery Neolithic, but through into the ceramic Neolithic period. So is it possible that they were looking towards the rising, not just of the sun at the time of the equinoxes, but also before that, the constellation of Leo, of which obviously the brightest star is Regulus, as we've mentioned. So this, of course, as I said, is something that we see in connection with the Sphinx. I mean, for those that accept that the Sphinx could be as much as, 10,500 BC, whether it is or not, we don't know. And in Egypt, the lion represented the might of the sun, like Sekhmet in ancient Egypt, and of course, obviously, Leo. So you know, there's something to this connection between Karahan Tepe and the constellation of Leo, but I don't think that it would be the sole alignment. I think that there would have been many alignments. I think that they would have been checked by going up onto the northern Noah itself, standing there and observing the horizon, mostly to do with the north, where the stars revolve around the northern celestial pole, and also towards the east, where the sun rises at the time of the equinoxes. So let's look at the summary then. So the Karahan complex suggests a hierarchical organization, multiple functionality, and the presence of a tiered society. I mean, that's what's beaming out from this site, this extraordinary site. Activities inside the enclosures would have extended into the lower world via Quachuali North Tepe and into the sky world via horizontal synchronizations with celestial bodies such as the sun, moon, stars, and Milky Way. Remember that Milky Way is the road or river to the sky world. That's very, very, very important and would have been in the past. So is Karahan Tepe proof of a civilization of the ancients, an entire high culture existing as early as 12,000 years ago in southeastern Anatolia? Also evidence of what I predicted we would find there back in 1996. We'll come back to that in a second. New pre-pottery Neolithic sites are being found all the time in southeastern Turkey. Another big complex was recently found near Şanlıurfa, which I'll bring you details of in due course. Can't say anything about it at the moment, but that is also going to blow things out of the water as well. Now, just to blow my own trumpet on this one, when From the Ashes of Angels came out in 1996, my colleague David Roll, Egyptologist and the author of A Test of Time, wrote, "Only time and further study will confirm Andrew Collins's hypothesis of an advanced culture of prehistoric date existing in the mountains of eastern Turkey, and of course southeast Turkey. If he is right, then this book will have staked its claim as a major contributor to the study of the genesis of civilization. And I'd like to think that I've been proved correct." Well, aside from that book, I did a whole book on Göbekli Tepe called Göbekli Tepe Genesis of Gods, came out in 2014. That's an introduction by Graham Hancock. And the new book, co-authored with Greg Little, is coming out next March, called The Origins of the Gods, the Gezem Caves, Skinwalkers, and Contact with Transdimensional Intelligences. You can order that now from Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And if you want to hear more on Karahan Tepe, I'll be talking about it again at this year's Origins event, which is online. The date is Saturday, 6th of November, 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's myself, Greg Little, Hugh Newman, Jim Vieira, and JJ Ainsworth on that. I'll be talking about this, but by that time, so much more will be known about Karahan, and we'll also have a panel discussion. So if you want to know about Karahan yourself, if I've not answered questions, then by all means, you know, just ask, really. And also, my website is andrewcollins.com. As I said, I'll link the relevant articles on Karahan Tepe that I've done. I'll link Graham Hancock's recent blog on Karahan and the discoveries there, and anything else that I think is relevant, including a couple of vids that Hugh Newman did featuring myself at Karahan. So with that, I shall say thank you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe if you want more videos like this, because we are covering everything to do with prehistoric discoveries that we are interested in. Not all of them, of course, because we'll be here all day, but stuff like what's going on at Karahan, which everybody wants to know about, here it is. So with that, I shall say thank you very much.